It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. When our politics start to fail, how much of everything else collapses with it? That's a question we're thinking about after hundreds of thousands of Michiganders lost power over the 4th of July weekend. The problem is baked into our systems. Climate change is bringing more intense storms, and our aging grid can't handle them. So, regulators approve rate hikes to pay for updates. But those updates take years, and people are feeling the pain in their bills now. There are solutions Democratic legislators have put on the table to solve this, providing fair compensation when the power goes out, guaranteeing utility service improves, preventing consumers from paying for CEO bonuses. But these bills haven't gone anywhere. They often don't even get a hearing. Why can't our politics fix this issue? And what does it say about the people we've elected to the state legislature? Colin Jackson is a reporter for the Michigan Public Radio Network. He's here to discuss all of this and a little more. Colin, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the bills I mentioned, fair compensation when the power goes out, limiting how often rates can climb, that's part of a package of bills known as the Michigan Ratepayer Bill of Rights. These bills have been introduced in various ways. They're sponsored by and supported by Democrats. Do you have a sense of why they don't get Republican support in the same way?
You know, I think it could be a few different things, but I do want to just point out before we get into, the idea that this specific package is just Democratic sponsored, the Democrats did have a trifecta that they could have done bigger steps on, in past years from 2023 to 2024, that legislative session. And so while you do see Democrats putting their names on this bill right now, and this is, more popular with the progressive side of the Democratic caucus, I do think you do see some sort of bipartisan pushback against these things. And I think that can be for various reasons. For one, I think when you talk about energy grid issues and power issues in the state, a lot of that is tied to DTE, which covers Southeast Michigan, which is typically where more Democratic districts are affected. So part of that could just be you don't necessarily see the same amount of, input from Republican districts and Republican voters. But on the other side, I think when you talk about lowering energy costs and lowering power costs and utility costs, that is something that you do see both sides of the aisle talking about quite a bit. It's just the approach to it in general varies drastically and differs drastically. On the Republican side of the aisle, when you talk about energy affordability, a lot of that conversation goes about rolling back the state's clean energy standards. And you'll see Republicans blame that for raising energy bills, while Democrats want to do more regulation, I guess.
Yeah, that has me thinking about Republican House Speaker Matt Hall, who's criticized DTE, but he's also promoted repealing Michigan's clean energy mandates. I'm guessing that's one of the people that you were thinking about. Michigan is supposed to run on 100% clean electricity by 2040. Why is he most interested in repealing clean energy laws?
This is something that, again, Democrats struggled to get across the finish line. To their credit, they did get it across the finish line after a lot of political heavy lifting. Republicans have always disliked it, especially in outstate areas, like the UP, in northern Michigan. They say that natural gas, that some of these fossil fuels are what's helping keep their energy running, especially during the wintertime, when they don't necessarily believe they can depend on solar energy or wind energy the same way they could rely on natural gas to heat their house. And so you see a huge amount of pushback from that, and you'll hear a lot of talking points, for example, about energy poverty, so what does it matter if all our energy is clean if no one can afford it? If you look at the science and the facts and the data, there's a lot of other conversations about how renewable energy is becoming a lot more affordable and a lot more accessible. But besides that, you are still seeing, this pushback to it. And I think, again, the messaging they're having around this bill package to repeal the state's 2040 clean energy law in total, they're saying this isn't about, boosting fossil fuels or boosting renewable energy or clean energy. It's just about making sure that the energy source powering your house is the cheapest, whatever that may be.
But as you pointed out earlier, The price of renewable energy has significantly dropped and has become much more affordable. No?
I mean, this is part of politics, right?
Is okay.
I think that's part of the politics behind the moment, because the subtext is still you have this, I guess, this lean toward fossil fuels, even though renewable energy is becoming more cheaper, becoming more affordable. And we're seeing, obviously a lot of environmental and health impacts to the detriment of Michiganders from the continued use of burning fossil fuels. But nonetheless, I think you still see these narratives persist.
Okay, something connected to this. Money in politics, which you've also mentioned. I mean, reporting has shown that between now and 2023, 60% or more of Michigan legislators accept money from DTE or Consumers Energy. What kind of effect is that having?
I think we're seeing the effect that it's having. We haven't seen a lot. Every time you see a bill package come out to, put stronger regulations on the big power companies like DTE, Consumers Energy, it wouldn't just be limited at them, even though I think that's the target of a lot of these conversations, the elephant in the room. You're not seeing them move forward. And again, this is under Democratic control. This is under Republican control. I think it's just one of the things that has existed in Michigan government for a long time. And you are starting to see pushback to the system where, you see organizers saying basically, if we want to remove the influence, if we want to be able to regulate utility companies in a meaningful way, we need to stop their ability to give, and so you're seeing stuff like that, like the Mop Up Michigan movement, the Michiganders for Money Out of Politics petition. That's where that's coming from. You've seen legislators introduce similar bills that does have at least one Republican sponsor on it. I believe Republican Representative Jim DeSantis on that bill, if I'm not mistaken. But at the same time, you're seeing the utility companies push back and say, we don't use our ratepayer revenue to give for our political giving. That's a whole separate pot of money that comes from donations, et cetera. And, they're saying that their political giving helps them continue to provide the best service to Michigan through the policies best for them. And so you're seeing that back and forth.
I mean, what you mentioned, the effort to get money out of politics has resulted in a ballot measure. It's trying to stop public utilities and large state government contractors from donating to political causes. What do you think would happen if this passes? Would it change our politics?
First, it has to pass, right?
Yeah.
Which means it has to get on the ballot. But if it does, let's say this does become law and all of a sudden, large healthcare like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, DTE consumers, they're no longer able to give to Michigan campaigns. It'll be interesting, it'll be interesting to see. I'm assuming this will end up in court if it does pass. I don't think you have just anytime you have that much money at stake and that much interest at play, this doesn't end up in court. But that's just me prognosticating. I am curious to see it with other people too. I don't know. Like, I think that there's always the perception that political donations correlate to political favors. I don't know if that is always true, because you still have policymakers and lawmakers that might just have a certain perspective on an issue, and that might not change even if they do take money. And again, not every lawmaker blocking this legislation is taking money from those companies in the first place. So I don't want to overstate something, but it could be interesting to see as an experiment.
So in other words, getting money out of politics, you don't see that as being a panacea to change lawmakers entirely in the way that they're voting.
Yeah, like, do I think it could be a sea shift? Yeah, I think so, and to a certain extent. Do I think it's going to be everything? No, because I do still think regardless of whether or not people are taking money from DTE consumers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or whatever, I don't think that necessarily means they're going to all of a sudden, yes, let's regulate right now, do a complete 180 from previous positions, or be more willing to get on something, Yeah, I think there's a certain level of, if you give politically, there's a certain level of your thumbs on the scale. But it's still not your scale at the end of the day. It's someone else's vote. It's what someone else does in office. I'm not saying it's a perfect system or that right now you don't have to consider these things. I'm just saying, I don't know if it'll be the biggest change in the world. It will still be a sizable shift though, and I don't want to understate that.
I hear you. You're saying there's no easy answer here, which is good. You're sowing some skepticism into our conversation and reminding us all that there is no quick, fast solution. That is good for us to keep in mind. I want to stay on the grid. Speaking of no fast, quick solution here, but I want to focus more specifically on data centers. Governor Gretchen Whitmer supports data centers. Early last month, a Kalamazoo reporter asked her what she made of residents' concerns about them.
I understand that people are really nervous about AI, they're nervous about jobs, they're nervous about the environment, and that's why we insisted that jobs at this facility are going to be good paying union jobs. It's why we insisted that there be a closed loop water system so that they're being good stewards of the water. It also makes sure that we are not taking any energy off the grid. It is one of the things that there will be a $300 million benefit to all the ratepayers in the vicinity who are DTE customers. And so we're holding high, pure Michigan standards. Every data center in the country should follow our lead, frankly. And when we do it right, it actually can benefit our state.
Okay, the governor is speaking about the data center project in Saline Township. Despite a lot of pushback from many Michiganders, why does the governor want to attract data centers to the state?
Honestly, I think she believes what she's saying. I think she does believe this will be good for the state. I do take her at face value when it comes to the data center issue in terms of, I think, and this isn't just the governor, right? This is when you talk to the folks in the legislature who did vote for the bill to offer data centers tax breaks that came here, to come here. And I think that there's a certain level of confidence in their legislation. I'll put it that way, where they feel like to take advantage of these tax credits right now, some of these big hyperscale data centers, they have to follow a certain level of regulations and rules. One of those being they're not supposed to take electricity in any way that's supposed to raise rates for residential customers. On top of that, there's still the Public Service Commission, the state's utility regulators. A lot of these projects to be able for, the big power companies to be able to provide energy to these companies, there's a certain level of agreements, contracts, et cetera, that need to be signed, and there's been a lot of criticism throughout that process, especially when it came to OpenAI Oracle data center happening in Saline Township. But at the end of the day, I do think people are, the official line that you're hearing from people, and I do have to take them at face value, is that, they've seen where these went wrong in places like Virginia. They see where other states have struggled with these policies or where the communities have been negatively impacted. And they personally do feel like Michigan's laws are stronger than those other states and are able to set the example where other states have failed.
I do have to push back in one way, Colin, because we just had a lawmaker on the show who said that he would have maybe acted differently when it comes to supporting that bill to give tax breaks to data centers and to, more broadly, AI companies. That was Representative Elabas Farhat. So I'm wondering if we're going to start hearing from other lawmakers, if they are pressed on it, who are going to say this. Go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. I do think there's a certain level of buyer's remorse as well. We talked about the heavy political lifting it took to get the 2040 clean energy standards across the finish line. This is another package that, there is a lot of muscle involved to get this through. That being said, you are seeing, especially even from the former bill sponsors of those bills, bills that they say would tighten this up. Right now, a lot of those regulations mainly apply to data centers that want to take advantage of these sales and use tax exemptions, which I don't know why a data center want to come here and not take advantage of those sales and use tax exemptions. It's a lot of money on the table. But, they say that we need state regulations for all data centers. They're saying we need things like making sure that politicians and policymakers are not signing NDAs around these projects. They're saying things that we need to make sure it's not just electric rates, it's also water rates to make sure that, people's water bills aren't being impacted, some bigger environmental protections, etc. And so you're seeing different plans come out of the House, coming out of the Senate, coming out of the Republican majority in the House and the Democratic minority. And so I think despite all, and obviously you're seeing the calls for moratorium on data centers. I think those are going to go fewer or less places than the calls for regulations, but, we'll see.
You think that moratoriums are not going to continue to be as successful?
Not under this administration, at least, not before the end of the year. Again, these are projects that the governor fought very hard to bring to Michigan. And as we saw this past week, she's willing to make unpopular decisions, especially among her base, if it's something that she feels she needs to do. And so I don't see her all of a sudden reversing course minus, something huge to completely shift the conversation.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Colin Jackson, a reporter for the Michigan Public Radio Network who covers politics. We're discussing why our uncompromising politics has made it harder to regulate data centers, AI, and an expensive and unstable electrical grid. Colin, one reason Michiganders don't like data centers beyond the environmental footprint is because they're leery of artificial intelligence or the companies that run them. You recently did a piece on AI in politics. Why were you concerned about artificial intelligence tampering with our politics in the first place?
Yeah, I don't know if I was necessarily concerned about AI and tampering with politics. I mean, yes, in general, like a deep fake of somebody saying something they didn't say is a terrifying thing. And I think with things like Sora 2, those have become increasingly more.
Explain.
These are different platforms where you can create hyper realistic videos of somebody and basically make them say or do anything you want. You know what I mean? You can have President Trump just hugging Bear Clinton for an uncomfortably long period of time. You can do silly videos, or you could start to really do some damage. And I can do a whole fake interview scene between you and I, only we're saying completely different things. I mean, maybe not the, AI. I don't think they would be able to replicate our faces very well. But, is that type of thing, though.
These faces, tell you what, these are faces made for radio. Yeah, go on.
One of a kind. But no, so I do think that in general is a scary thing. And I think that's something that Michigan lawmakers and some other state lawmakers across the country were concerned about, too. And so a few years ago, Michigan passed these bills where it basically regulated the use of AI in politics, where you need to have disclaimer logos or disclaimer labels saying this is AI. It regulates who can use it, who's beholden to it, et cetera. And in the years since we got that AI law, we really haven't seen a lot of just deep fakes being spread. And I mean, in the sense that trying to trick voters into thinking somebody did something. Instead, what we're seeing this year, you might think of the Spencer Pratt videos in LA. He was running for LA mayor. Or in this race right now, you're just seeing people use AI and to make really just silly over the top videos. Republican Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt, he was running for governor. His campaign is one of the ones who really endorsed these and started making. I think there was 3 of them that they made where he's in a tractor, chasing down the governor. One of them, he's chasing her down and someone who's caught up in a political scandal. Another one, he's kind of wrecking some hoity-toity dinner, lunch party gathering that the governor, Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State Benson, who's running for governor.
So these are absurd, if I may jump in. They're absurd examples. You were interested, not concerned, in these absurd examples.
I was interested. Yeah, I was interested because, why is this happening? Where is this going? Is this just the future of political ads right now? We've always seen silly ads in politics, but seeing AI used this way, I thought was so bizarre, especially when they become, some of the videos do get a little eerie, it kind of horror movie coded in certain ways.
So the question then, of course, is this the first step to AI infiltrating politics in more nefarious type ways? I mean, right now, the examples you've mentioned are laughable, but is there the concern that it's going to take a more serious turn?
Right, and that's the question, because once something becomes endemic and something, can come in benign and then turn scary later. I think that's always a possibility that we need to think about. That being said, we talk about data centers, we talk about all these things, people are still, how many times are people opening ChatGPT on the regular basis? There is a demand for this in some way, shape, or form. And so coming back to the politics question, I do think there's a level of, this is fun today, but how long is it going to be fun for? And, that's question of like what the future trends are going to be, where's the electorate going to be, and what do we want them to be in the future, yeah, I don't know. It's something to watch for sure. I don't necessarily think even these silly AI ads, I don't necessarily think they're good for politics, but they are interesting and they're cheap and campaigns can do them really well, really fast.
They feel like a cautionary tale, to be sure. I mean, and from AI to data centers to our electrical grid, at the end of the day, it seems like it's been hard for politicians to compromise on how to properly regulate these things. So that's what I want to end on here. I mean, one big thing legislators have regulated is phones in classrooms. That was a truly bipartisan effort. When you look at the legislature, are there other big issues that you think representatives can compromise on and regulate together?
I think Lansing loves a deadline. Lansing loves needing something that they absolutely have to do or they fear negative consequences. Passing a budget is something that they had to do or fear negative consequences. They didn't get it done by the July 1st deadline, but they did get it done. And one of the ways they got it done was a lot of horse trading with bills and legislation. And some of these were low-hanging fruit, like different interstate licensure compact bills, etc. Some of them were a little bit more stretches that kind of got swept into everything else. And, for example, we're talking about, bills with that deal with like low-income housing tax credits or some other legislation to that extent, where I think those bills, if you look at the votes for all the bills that passed to this past, big legislative session where they were there damn near a whole day, that those bills, mostly passed with bipartisan votes. And I think part of that was just leadership told them, hey, we're here all night. These are going to get done. Vote for it. Or if you really don't have to vote, if you really don't want to, don't do it. But I think that those were driving factors behind getting some of those things done. One other piece of policy area where I think we're still seeing appetite on both sides is making medical bills cheaper, whether that's medical debt forgiveness or hospital pricing transparency, as Republican Speaker Hall has wanted, or, what have you. I think then it becomes an issue of dealing with personalities, who gets that law, who gets their name on the law, what exactly are the policies, how do we approach the issue? Because not everyone, but I think there are often goals that people have, shared goals that people have, but their approaches to it differ dramatically. And I think you need some extra push to get it done.
Colin Jackson, reporter for the Michigan Public Radio Network covering politics. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's the Metro on WDET. As we've been discussing, politics is a competition of ideas, coalitions, and candidates. Next, we'll hear about what all that looks like for the Republican side of the governor's race. Stay with us.